Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Jeanette, and I'm currently joining you guys if you guys are watching us live from the Aquarium of the Pacific out in Long Beach, California. Like I mentioned, since we are in Long Beach, California, if you are currently watching us live, it is now October 9th afternoon. It is about 2 p.m., exactly 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The really amazing thing about AOAs, our Aquarium Online Academies, is that we are tuning with you live. And if you are joining us live as well, you are more than welcome to, and I'll be requesting you to write down any questions or any observations to get a little bit of a contact with you all from your own homes. The way that best to do that, if you are joining us live, you are welcome to text us any questions to the number below in 562-286-1838. If you are not joining us live and you're watching us at a later time that isn't on October 9th, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you can always email us a question. We do have a staff member on standby ready to answer any questions or maybe any late observations that you might have. Or if you're just even wondering anything, we are available also at live@lbaop.org. Like I mentioned, we are you guys live here from the Aquarium of the Pacific out in Long Beach. However, I am not alone in my studio today. I also have my friend Cole, who is going to be doing a lot of the background magic here. He is going to be showing us some really amazing media that we have available here from our aquarium and out from our explorers as well. So, today's topic for our Aquarium Online Academy is actually food webs. But before we look at any sort of web or start talking about what exactly they are in our animal kingdom, we're going to go ahead and start warming up our scientist brains because we are going to be doing some adventuring together and exploring. So being a scientist does not mean you're just locked up in a lab using really fancy tools and instruments, wearing a white lab coat. In fact, scientists, what they do all the time is that they're asking themselves questions about how or why something works the way it does. Okay? So they do that by making observations. And an observation could be maybe noticing a specific texture, a specific structure, colors, patterns, behaviors, any sort of, even if you're able to recognize any of the animals, right? So today we're going to be using our observation skills through the sense of our vision or our eyes. Okay? So today we're going to be taking a closer look to warm up our scientist brains here and practice those observation skills. We're going to be taking a closer look at the screen behind me. And this is what we call a habitat that we have here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And this habitat is the one that we know as a kelp forest. Okay, so I want you to start thinking about what things you are noticing about our specific kelp forest here. The name that we call here, the specific kelp forest, is our Blue Cavern Gallery here at our aquarium. And if you're wondering ever what's happening in our Blue Cavern, any of our exhibits, we also have plentiful of live cams that you guys could also tune in from at our website, on our YouTube channel, or on explore.org. Okay, so I'm going to step off the screen just for a few quick seconds. And I want you guys to start thinking about what are some things you are noticing about our beautiful kelp forest habitat here that is Blue Cavern. So, again, we're making scientific observations. So, that means, do you recognize any of the animals? Any of the kind of maybe things that are moving around, maybe things that are not moving around and are not alive. Any sort of patterns or textures, or even the way they're swimming. That shows a lot of how they're behaving. So think about any movement that you're seeing, any sort of behaviors. Also any colors or patterns you see within the habitat itself. Let's see, I'll give you a few more seconds, right? And if you have someone next to you, maybe you could point them out. Maybe you can start talking about it. Or you can also start recognizing anything on here for Blue Cavern. Maybe you've had an experience with one of these guys before. But go ahead and take one more second as I go ahead and start stepping on our screen here. All right. So, some things you might have noticed, right, are these sort of like really long, tall stalks of something, right? So if we take a closer look at what these are what we call kelp. And if we're thinking of the name of this habitat, it's a kelp forest. So just like if you were kind of walking through a forest full of trees, right, on both sides of a road or a path, they're kind of like what this kelp does here. So kelp is actually the first part of the structure of our food web that we're going to be working on together. And the way we're going to be keeping track of all the different that make up a food web is we're going to start a little bit of a drawing together. So at the end of our little class here, we should have a really well-defined kind of layout of a specific food web that goes on or happens in a habitat like this, like a kelp forest. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start stepping onto my doc cam here because I actually have a few things ready here for me. The first thing I have, and you might want to grab, right, is a sort of like sheet of paper. I have my white paper here. Let me see if I could zoom out real quick. There we go. Just so we can get the full image on all sides here. Let me straighten it up a little bit. Perfect. So the first thing I have is my set of white paper. I also have an arrangement of different colors here, right? If those of you, maybe you pointed out the different kind of arrangement or colors that you saw in our, oh, my bad, I might have clicked something here. Let me go back. There we go. Right? So something that you might notice are the different sort of color arrangements here, more earthy tones, like maybe grays, maybe some greens, some sort of browns, maybe a little bit of red, very earth tone colors. So to kind of start thinking about how our kelp is laid out, the kelp makes the majority of our kelp forest here. And the kelp is what we call in our food web a producer, okay? So thinking about what a producer is, they kind of use the energy from a specific place. So if we're thinking about where they're grabbing their energy from, they're actually grabbing their energy from the sun. But let me backtrack a little bit because there's another important part that makes this habitat. And you might have noticed it already. It plays a big role here, right? Everything in here is underwater. So I'm going to give myself some waves here. Some nice loopy waves that are moving and swishing around in that ocean. There we go. And I hope it pops off. Let me turn around to see if it pops off a little bit. I might have to reshade it in or grab a darker color, but that's okay. Maybe this darker blue color to kind of set multiple waves here. Or maybe I can change my brightness. Add a little bit more here. Oh, that's a little too bright. Let me go the opposite way. I think maybe if I make it a little bit darker. How does that show up? A little slightly more. Perfect. And no worries, I'll go ahead and re-bold, kind of bolden up my lines as well. And try to use more darker colors here. But I'm going to start by making up all of that water. Because this habitat happens to be underwater. So creating those beautiful kind of forest structures that we have on land, but completely underwater. There we go. Those are beautiful waves. So, like we mentioned earlier, the base of all of our food webs actually starts from energy from the sun. So I'm going to use orange here. I'm going to draw myself a really big sun right up here. There we go. Go back a little bit more. And it's going to be a happy day today. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a little happy face because I think we just have to. Just like that. Look at that. Giving all that energy to the rest of our habitat here. right? You could even give yours some really cool sunglasses if you'd like. I'm going to stick with my happy face here. But this is where all of the energy comes from that provides for the rest of the habitat. Okay? And the reason that we have this sort of like energy given off is through a process called photosynthesis. Okay? And there are specific kind of critters or specific kind of organisms that actually do photosynthesize. Okay? So not all of animals are able to do it, right? Mostly the ones that are able to do it are the ones that we call producers. Okay? So the producers in our habitat that we saw like in Blue Cavern are the kelp itself. Okay? But if we go back to our Blue Cavern maybe, let's see how that sort of kelp is arranged throughout the Blue Cavern. So if we follow that kelp, remember they're long stalks, if we follow them all the way down, they're stuck and attached to these really large rocks. Do we see that? They're not really coming out from the gravel or from the sediment at the bottom. They're kind of holding on to these really strong rocks. And they need a really strong base because imagine all those waves moving them around, right? They're going to be moved around very, very often. It could be moved around for miles and miles and miles. But they don't do that because there's a structure at the bottom that kind of looks like roots on the plants up on land. They're going to go ahead and hold on to those rocks, and those are the parts of the kelp that we call a hold fast. Okay? With this root-like system, they're going to be able to grow incredible amounts going upward. And when there's no more room to grow out of. They don't grow out of the ocean, right? But they're going to start kind of creating these canopies going sideways, right? Creating those luscious canopies and creating all of that shade and those piercing views of sunlight as well. All right? Again, as they continue growing upwards, they can't extend no more, right? They reach the top of the ocean. They're going to start moving sideways, creating these beautiful kelp forests. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my dock cam here. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to start by creating those rocks. The rocks are not part of the kelp, but they really, really strongly support the kelp. So I'm going to start creating some rocks here at the bottom. I'm going to move my paper slightly upwards. I'm going to create some really great rocks in order for our hold fast part of our kelp to hold on to. And I'm going to need lots of kelp as well, like the ones we saw over there. So I'm going to create some rocks, make them like kind of slightly bumpy. Sometimes it's really great to create some cracks on your rocks to make them look more bumpy, add more texture as well. So I'm going to randomly create this trail of kind of cracks along my rocks. Again, to kind of create the vision that they are rocks. Extend this one a little bit more. It's very random. No organized matter here. All right. And I'm going to start creating those root-like structures. Remember, kind of like a claw. Those are the hold fast. Wherever you want to start your stalk of kelp, go ahead and create that hold fast, kind of like little claws, holding on to those rocks. Just like that. And I'm going to do probably 4 stalks here to get us started, right? And then they're going to go ahead and start stretching out. I might change to my green color here. But they're going to go ahead and start stretching out upwards within those stalks. But again, when they reach a certain height, going upwards, there's no more room to grow out of, so they're going to start going a little bit sideways. Just like that, creating those long canopies. And the reason they're growing upwards is an adaptation in itself, right? An adaptation is something that they need in order for them to survive and grow. Because remember, they're getting their energy from the sun, right? So that means that they need to be able to reach out. So the faster they grow, the higher they grow, creating those canopies, the more space they take up, and the more space they'll get to receive all of that sunlight. All right. And if we think about those stalks of kelp, there's actually a specific part that comes out of those kind of stalks. And I actually have a little bit of a kelp sample or a kelp model here in the studio with me that I'm pulling out right now. But let's take a closer look at what that looks like. So I'm going to put it right here above my drawing. So again, this is the part that we just drew, kind of like the stalk part. And then they have kind of like these sort of little circular structures here. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Right? They have like these little pockets. And these little pockets are the ones that we call pneumatices. Okay? And they work like little air bladders. So the reason they're able to just continue growing up directly and not just fall over because of all the ocean water is because these are little pockets or bladders full of air. So if you think about when you go out for a swim, or if you use a floaty, right? They're kind of like air pockets that are buoyant. So meaning that they're able to hold themselves up. And coming out of those little air bladders or pneumatices are the actual kind of leaf-like structure. Not entirely a plant because they are a type of algae, but this is the part that collects all of that sunlight, and it's also where photosynthesis happens, much like the plants on land. Okay, and this is the part that we call the blade. So let's go ahead and add all those kind of different structures on our drawing here. So again, these are the ones that happen to have photosynthesize. So we're going to go ahead and add into our drawing here. So again, I'm going to add those little tiny bumps, just like this. I'm going to draw a little bit form of a stem. Here we go. Draw a few here. As many as you'd like. Wherever you draw a little stem or like a thorn looking thing coming out of your stalk, I'm going to start drawing those little air bladders. Kind of little circles. They're kind of starting to look like Christmas lights now. But pretty soon we'll also add our blades. Again, they're the ones that are doing photosynthesis, taking that energy from the light, the sunlight, and converting it into usable energy to give off to maybe something else that'll eat it. Okay, and then I'm going to start creating all of these blades here. Just like this. And it's able to float up with those air bladders. I missed an air bladder here. There we go. And again, they're going to start growing sideways. But they will continue to grow and grow. Just like that. So drawing my blades in here similarly to how I would do a regular leaf. There we go. Just like that. All right. So just to keep a little bit of track here, I am actually going to use, let's say, I'll do red. I'm going to use my red here to kind of keep track of all this sort of food web here. So again, the energy is coming from the sun and it's being given off to our kelp here. Just like that. So that's the first stage here of our food web. So thinking about who eats kelp, there's actually a really cute little guy. It's one of my favorites, right? See if you can take a guess, or if Cole can show us a picture of what's next on our food web. Who might be eating this kelp? And you might notice it's actually snacking on a little bit of kelp in this picture as well, right? This is our sea urchin, and it's the really spiky friend that we have here. This is specifically a purple sea urchin, right? And purple sea urchins actually have a lot of great adaptations in themselves. One of them being that it's not just a pom-pom, a spiky pom-pom, or a plant. It's a living animal, and it's going to be munching on all of this kelp. And let's see if we can take a closer look on what it looks like when it's eating or where it's eating from. Because it's a specific name that we call Aristotle's lantern. So if we were to grab this little sea urchin and kind of flip it over, just like that, so you can see the bottom of it, that is where you would see its tiny mouth, right? And sometimes when you're walking through our our habitats here at our aquarium, you're able to see, since we have them in a little bit of a glass-like structure here, you're able to see their little tiny structures under them, something that you don't see often because that's what they use to kind of hang on to. The first thing I notice are kind of these little, like underneath spikes that we see here. Not as spiky as the top view, but these are the little tiny tube feet they have. So each of these little string-like structures they use to kind of suction onto surfaces and move very, very slowly. So they kind of travel. And if we even zoom in a little bit closer, Cole, I think I'm starting to notice something right in that middle section there. Do you see it? It kind of looks like a little star, or even like a little, maybe a flower pattern with the little petals, right? I think that's good there. So what we're starting to hear this, and it's essentially the teeth of, or what the teeth-like structures of our urchin friends here. Okay, and if you ever get to see a sea urchin eat seaweed, it's one of my favorite things because they literally look like little shredders eating up all of that kelp. They eat pretty fast with their little Aristotle's lantern. They're gonna go ahead and venture the world finding some kelp with their tube feet as sensors, and as they move around, they're gonna go ahead and when they grab onto some kelp, they're going to send it to the bottom of their body where they have their mouth, like the one that we have here, right? And they're going to kind of use it to grind up really, really fast all of that luscious kelp. And that is their favorite snack, my friends. Okay, so let's go back to our dock cam here and add our next stage in our food web here. So like we said earlier, the kelp itself is going to be a producer, because it's going to produce all of that sunlight energy and turn it into usable energy for our other friends, like our urchin. So I'm going to draw in my urchin here. And then I'm going to draw little circles here. And each of those little circles, are going to get a little spike. Just like that. And I'm going to draw them mostly on the roots, or the base, not the roots exactly, the holdfast area. Just like that. So they're getting some good snacks here. And I'm going to finish by drawing my arrow again to keep track of here. So again, the sunlight energy goes towards the kelp. The kelp then gets eaten by our urchins with that famous Aristotle's lantern. And then that urchin actually gets eaten by a really popular furry critter. Let's see if Cole could find our next friend here. There we go. So our urchins are being oftentimes eaten by our sea otters, like the really fuzzy guy that we have here, right? So let's take a look at what kind of structures the sea otters, are using in order to eat all of this luscious kelp. So I actually have a little bit of a treat for us. I have a skull of a sea lion. It is a model of a skull, but it really shows us the difference of those teeth, right? So once they get the inside of the urchins, they're not going to be eating them whole, right? But they're also able to eat really crunchy things with these teeth. So the front ones are going to be a little bit sharper, like we have here, while the back ones are going to do most of our chewing, just like we do. So kind of like molar style teeth, where they grind up things with crunchy shells after they take really good bites of them, just like that. All right, so I'm going to draw in my next friend here. So that is our sea otter. I'm going to draw a long oval just like that. It's going to be a very simple otter, but I am going to try my best. I'm going to draw its head, its very cute little paws, just like this. And I'm going to draw its back paws, kind of help a little bit more better with swimming. And I'm actually going to draw it with a little snack in its hand. So I'm going to draw one of our urchins that we did earlier. Just like that. It's taking it up to the surface where it's going to eat it. And I'm just going to finish off by drawing its face. So its little eyes and its snout. Just like that. And a little bit of whiskers here. There we go. All right, so I have my beautiful sea otter here, and it has a little bit of a snack. And I'm gonna draw in my arrow again to keep our food web going here. And that is our sea otter is what we call our our secondary consumer. So again, our urchin was our primary consumer, right? Our sea otter eats the urchin, being a secondary consumer here, right? And the really important thing about our sea otter is that it is actually what we call a keystone species. So meaning that if sea otters did not exist, or maybe they were getting in low populations, that'll go ahead and affect the population of the urchins, because there would be a ton more urchins if there wasn't those sea otters supporting by eating those urchins. And unfortunately, sometimes in some kelp forests, that's actually the thing that happens, right? We call these places where that's happening, where there's a considerable amount of urchins eating up that kelp. We call those sea urchin bears. They look a lot like this. So what once was a luxurious kelp forest that was thriving with all of those animals and supporting all of those animals inside the kelp forest, right? They become this. Do we see any kelp here? Any long strands of kelp? No, right? And that's exactly what happens. And that is why we consider our sea otters to be a keystone species, because they protect a lot of what this habitat is and keep it thriving and going. And as we can see, that means that we are all connected, right? So if we think about going back to our doc cam here, and kind of a little bit of a review of what we've talked about, and think about how everything is connected, right? If we think about a web itself, or where our food web got its name, like a spider web, if we think about one strand kind of tearing off here, that means the rest of the web is not going to be strong enough to thrive and survive and create this beautiful habitat like the drawing we just made. So if that means if our sea otter here, maybe something was happening to it, right? It's going to go ahead and affect the population numbers of our sea urchins here. And if sea urchins numbers were affected, let's say there was a lot more sea urchins at some point, there's going to be a lot more urchins eating up our kelp, right? And without our kelp, there are no kelp forests. So that means we play a big role in how much this habitat thrives and survives. And it can also affect other populations, right? If we think about all the different varieties of animals that live in our thriving kelp forests. And if we're thinking about our kelp forest, if you're in California, it's not that far away from us. It's actually our ocean backyard, right? California kelp forests are known to be a thriving habitat in itself and make up a lot of oceans here in California, just like the one that we have here, right? So it's not only going to be this sort of like specific web that we have here, it's a lot more complex than that, right? Sometimes there are fishes that we see here. There's a variety of sea stars, right? All of that kelp, those urchins, those sea that we all love and think are very adorable, they are all connected. So meaning that we play a big part in saving animals and habitats that are just like this. And you're already doing a great amount of it by joining us today and educating yourselves on what it is like in such a complex habitat in itself. All right, everyone, that is about all the time we have today, this afternoon. I thank you for joining us. If you are interested in maybe learning a little bit more about sharks, you can actually join us live at 3 p.m. in about a half hour today as well. If you are not joining us live and maybe you're watching us at a different time and you still have a question on some things we talked about today, you can always message us here. Message us at live@lbaop.org. That is all the time together. Thank you for exploring with us, friends, and don't forget to continue your explorations. Bye, everyone.